On a stormy night in Lagos, a young man stepped out of his father's mansion with nothing but a worn backpack, a set of paintbrushes, and eyes full of unshed tears. Behind him, the voice of his father, Chief Bamadiel Adedayo, thundered through the gates, "You are no longer my son." The neighbors peeked through their windows, whispering about how the heir to one of Nigeria's most powerful law firms had been thrown into the streets like a stranger. No one knew if he would survive the night, or ever return. Sit tight and let's dive into the story. Earlier that evening, the Adedayo dining room glowed with the warm light of a crystal chandelier. The marble table stretched long and flawless, reflecting the light from above. Framed certificates and oil paintings lined the cream-colored walls, reminders of the Adedayo legacy. The scent of egusi soup and freshly baked ajij bread filled the air, but the mood at the table was brittle, like glass ready to shatter. Chief Bamadiel Adedayo, a tall man with a stern face carved by decades in the courtroom, sat at the head of the table. He wore a finely tailored agbada, gold embroidery glinting in the light. His wife, Funk, sat to his right, elegant in a coral lace blouse, her geli perfectly tied. On his left was Toby, their only child, dressed simply in a short-sleeved shirt. He pushed his food around on his plate without eating. Funk tried to break the silence. "Toby, your father says the first week at Lagos Law School will be intense. Have you thought about what suit you'll wear? You know first impressions matter." She smiled warmly, trying to pull him in. Toby put down his spoon. He looked first at his mother, then at his father. "Mom. Dad. I'm not going to law school." The words hung in the air like smoke. His father froze. "What did you just say?" "I said, I'm not going to law school. I've decided to study fine arts at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka." The spoon in his father's hand clattered onto the table. Even the housemaid at the far corner stopped in her tracks. "Fine arts?" Bamadiel's voice rose. "You mean after all the money I have spent on your education, you want to waste your life painting pictures like those roadside boys in Oberland?" Toby straightened his back, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's not a waste. Art is what I love. I want to tell stories with my paintings, stories that matter." Bamadiel slammed his palm against the table so hard the glasses rattled. "Stories? Passion? You are my son, Toby. My only son. And you want to throw away everything I have built? I worked my whole life to create this legacy. You will not disgrace me with this madness." His mother reached out, her fingers trembling, and took Toby's hand under the table. "Toby, please, your father has done so much for us. Just think about your future. Law will give you stability. Art will not." But Toby pulled his hand away gently. "I've thought about it, Mom. I've thought about it every single day. My future is not in a courtroom. It's in my art." Bamadiel stood up abruptly, towering over him. His eyes blazed with fury. "Listen carefully. If you walk out of this house to chase this foolish dream, you are no longer my son. Don't call me. Don't come back. From this moment, you will be dead to me." The air thickened with tension. His mother's soft sobs broke the silence. Toby rose from the table, his chair scraping against the marble floor. He walked past his father without looking back, climbed the stairs to his room, and pulled out a small bag. Inside, he packed a sketch pad, 3 shirts, a pair of jeans, and his paintbrushes wrapped in cloth. When he came back downstairs, his father stood in the living room with folded arms, his jaw set like stone. The chandelier's light cast harsh shadows on his face. Toby walked to the door, turned to face him one last time, and said, "I can't live your dream, Dad. I have to live mine." Without waiting for a reply, he stepped out into the night. The humid air clung to his skin, and the street was quiet except for the distant honk of Danfo buses on the main road. The gates closed behind him with a loud metallic clang that echoed in his chest. He had just some money he had saved up, no plan, and no home, only his art and the stubborn belief that his dream was worth whatever it cost him. The rain began to fall. When Toby left the Adideo mansion that night, the streets of Lagos felt colder than the rain falling on his back. He walked for hours, past flickering streetlights and noisy Okada riders splashing through puddles. The city that had always seemed alive now felt unfriendly, even dangerous. By midnight, he found himself in Mushin, a place where the air smelled of exhaust fumes, grilled meat, and damp concrete. He found a cheap one-room apartment down a narrow alleyway. The landlord, a gruff man with tobacco-stained teeth, demanded 6 months' rent in advance. Toby handed over almost all the little money he had saved from doing odd design jobs in school. The room was small and damp, the plaster peeling from the walls. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. The mattress was thin and smelled of old sweat. But it was shelter. His days quickly fell into a rhythm of survival. In the mornings, he woke to the sounds of hawkers shouting, "Pure water!" "Gala," and children chasing each other barefoot down the alley. He sat on the floor by the window, the only place with decent light, and painted. He couldn't afford proper canvas, so he scavenged scraps of cardboard from shop fronts, ripped out the backs of old calendars, and even painted on bed sheets he found discarded at second-hand stalls. By late afternoon, he would pack up his brushes, change into a worn t-shirt, and head to a roadside suya stand where he worked until midnight. The smell of sizzling beef and pepper sauce clung to his clothes. Sometimes he earned tips, but most nights he barely made enough for food and rent. People mocked him. Neighbors whispered that he had been thrown out by his father for wasting his life. Former friends from his wealthy past crossed the street when they saw him, pretending not to know him. It hurt, but he told himself he had chosen this path. Some nights, when the hunger was too much, he thought about returning home, falling on his knees, and begging his father for forgiveness. But pride was a stubborn wall inside him. He couldn't bring himself to knock it down. The rainy season made things worse. One afternoon, after a heavy downpour flooded the alley, Toby sat on an overturned crate at the Lagos Art Village, holding a painting wrapped in plastic. It was a piece he had been working on for weeks, a barefoot boy standing before a cracked mirror, half his reflection missing. That was when he met her. Mama Chica. She was a short, plump woman with skin as dark as roasted coffee beans and eyes that seemed to see through you. She wore a faded Ankara wrapper and a headscarf tied loosely. Her tiny shop at the art village was filled with wood carvings, bead necklaces, and paintings from unknown artists. She spotted Toby's painting and stopped in her tracks. "Let me see that," she said, her voice deep and warm. Toby hesitated, but handed it over. She studied it for a long moment, her fingers tracing the jagged lines of the cracked mirror. Your pain has a voice, and it speaks through colors." Toby wasn't sure how to respond. "It's just something I made." She shook her head. "No, my boy. This is not just something. This is a story. And stories like this, they find their way into people's hearts." From that day, she let him display his work in her shop. It wasn't much, just a corner wall where she hung 2 or 3 of his pieces at a time. But it changed everything. Tourists from Europe and America sometimes wandered through the art village, and a few stopped to admire his work. His first sale was to a French couple who bought the cracked mirror painting for 15,000 Nigerian nairas. It wasn't enough to escape poverty, but it was enough to buy better brushes and a small set of acrylic paints. Slowly, the sales came. Not every week, sometimes not even every month, but enough to keep the fire in him alive. Mama Chica became like family. She would bring him jollof rice wrapped in foil when she saw him looking thin. Sometimes she'd scold him like a mother hen. "Toby, eat well. You cannot paint beauty if you let hunger kill you." For the first time since leaving home, he felt seen. But he didn't know that this woman, the one who had saved him, was connected to a dark part of his father's past. And when that truth came out, it would force him to choose between blood and justice. For years had passed since Toby walked out of his father's mansion with nothing but paintbrushes and stubborn pride. The Mushin apartment was still his home, though it had changed. The walls, once bare and damp, were now covered with his work, scenes of Lagos life, portraits of strangers, and pieces inspired by his own struggles. His name had begun to circulate quietly in Nigerian art circles. Not loudly, not in a way that would make headlines, but among those who cared about real art. Collectors whispered about the boy from Mushin, whose paintings carried a raw honesty they couldn't forget. Toby had learned discipline. Some mornings, he painted from sunrise to sunset without stopping. Other days, he walked through markets, bus parks, and slums, sketching faces and moments the world ignored. His style matured, bolder strokes, deeper colors, stories hidden in every corner of the canvas. Then came the Abuja Art Fair. It was Mama Chica who pushed him to go. "Pack your best works," she said, her voice firm as she tied her headscarf. "Not just the ones you think will sell. Take the ones that tell your truth." The fair was crowded with artists, buyers, and curious onlookers. The air smelled of grilled meat and fresh paint. For 2 days, Toby stood at his small stall, watching people glance at his work and move on. A few bought postcards and small sketches, but nothing big. On the third afternoon, as the sun dipped and the fair grew quieter, a tall white man with silver hair stopped in front of one of Toby's paintings. It was titled "The Boy Who Chose," a barefoot boy standing at a crossroads, one path leading to a bright courthouse, the other to a dimly lit room filled with colors. The man didn't move for a full 5 minutes. Then he turned to Toby and said, "Did you paint this?" "Yes," Toby replied cautiously. "My name is Daniel Harris. I own a gallery in New York. This is extraordinary. Would you consider showing your work in one of my exhibitions?" Toby blinked. "In New York?" "Yes. I think the world needs to see this." Within 3 months, arrangements were made. His passport was stamped for the first time. Mama Chica hugged him at the airport, whispering, "Go and make them see what I saw." The exhibition in New York was a whirlwind. The gallery was lit like a palace of glass, each painting displayed under warm lights. People in suits and elegant dresses sipped champagne as they moved from piece to piece. Toby felt out of place in his simple black shirt, but when people asked about his art, his voice grew steady. He spoke about Lagos, about struggle, about dreams worth fighting for. On the second night of the exhibition, a private collector, a tall black man with a deep Nigerian accent, approached him. "How much for The Boy Who Chose?" Before Toby could answer, Mr. Harris stepped in. "It's listed at $200,000. The man smiled, signed a check, and shook Toby's hand. "Your work, it speaks to my soul. Never stop painting." That single sale changed everything. Overnight, Nigerian newspapers called him the Pride of Mushin. Global magazines featured his story, the boy who had been cast out by his rich father for choosing art over law, only to rise to international fame. BBC Africa interviewed him, and his followers on social media exploded. Yet, with every headline, every congratulatory message, there was a quiet emptiness inside him. The applause felt hollow without the one person who had always been in his shadow, his father. Some nights, in his New York hotel room, he would stare out the window at the skyline and wonder, did his father even know he was alive? Did he know his son had made something of himself? The answer came one quiet evening, months later. Toby was back in Lagos for a short visit when his phone rang. It was his mother. Her voice trembled. "Toby," she began softly. "Mom. Are you okay? It's your father. His law firm is collapsing. He's sick. He needs you." Toby gripped the phone tightly, his mind spinning. This was the man who had thrown him out, who had sworn never to call him son. And now, he needed him. As he ended the call, he stood at the window of his Mushin apartment, looking at the city lights. For the first time in 4 years, he felt the pull of home. But he didn't know that walking back into that world would force him to confront a truth darker than he imagined. The Lagos air was thick and humid that morning as Toby's plane touched down at Murtala Muhammad International Airport. The moment he stepped into the arrival hall, a swarm of reporters tried to catch a glimpse of the young man whose name had been on Nigerian art blogs and global headlines. He ignored them. This was not a victory tour, it was a mission. A sleek black SUV waited for him outside. As it sped through the streets of Lagos, Toby stared out of the tinted window at the familiar chaos, Okadas weaving through traffic, hawkers balancing trays of groundnuts and gala, the distant sound of a street preacher's megaphone. Memories flooded in, nights of hunger in Mushin, the smell of roasting suya, the rain dripping through the hole in his ceiling. For years had passed, but the city's heartbeat hadn't changed. Finally, they turned onto the street where his father's prestigious law chambers once buzzed with clients, lawyers, and clerks. Now, the building looked tired. The paint was peeling, the once polished glass doors bore smudges, and only 2 cars were parked outside. The brass nameplate still read Bamadiel and Associates, but it had lost its shine. Toby stepped out, his shoes crunching on gravel. As he entered, the echo of his footsteps filled the near-empty reception. Only one secretary sat at the desk, typing slowly, her eyes flicking up in shock when she recognized him. Without a word, she motioned toward the office at the end of the hall. Inside, Chief Bamadiel sat hunched over a pile of documents. He was almost unrecognizable, the broad-shouldered man who once commanded courtrooms now looked shrunken. His hair had thinned, streaked with more gray than Toby remembered. He coughed into a handkerchief, unaware of the figure standing at the door. "Papa," Toby said quietly. The pen in Chief Bamadiel's hand froze. Slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes widened, as if doubting his own sight. His voice, once deep and commanding, trembled. "Toby, is it really you?" For a moment, neither moved. The years of silence stretched between them like a vast ocean. Toby stepped forward and placed a thick brown envelope on the desk. The sound it made was soft but heavy, like the weight of everything unsaid. "Open it," Toby murmured. Chief Bamadiel's hands shook as he untied the string. Inside was a check, 350 million Nigerian nairas, neatly signed. Enough to pay the firm's debts, salaries, and keep the business afloat for years. His father's breath caught. "Where did you get this?" Toby looked him dead in the eyes. "From the useless dream you once threw me out for." The words cut, but they carried no anger. Only truth. Chief Bamadiel's lips quivered. For the first time in years, he stood, his legs unsteady, and walked around the desk. When he reached his son, he didn't speak, he simply pulled him into a trembling embrace. Toby felt the bony frame beneath his father's suit. This was not the towering man who once told him art was worthless. This was someone smaller, humbled. And just as Toby's heart began to soften, his gaze shifted past his father to the desk. There, under the pile of case files, one folder caught his eye. A familiar name in bold letters, Mama Chica. Toby pulled away and pointed. "Why is her name here?" Chief Bamadiel hesitated. "It's complicated." Toby opened the file. His eyes scanned the documents quickly, a lawsuit from one of the firm's wealthiest clients, accusing Mama Chica of selling a forged painting. The penalty was devastating, she would lose her shop and her home. Toby's jaw clenched. The woman who gave him his first real chance in art, now being crushed by the same man who once crushed his dreams. He looked up at his father, his voice low but sharp. "We're going to fix this. All of it." Chief Bamadiel's eyes searched his son's face, perhaps realizing for the first time that the boy he once underestimated had returned, not just as a man, but as a force he could no longer control. Toby stared at the file on his father's desk, his chest tightening as his eyes ran over the plaintiff's name, Mama Chica. His mind reeled. The same Mama Chica who had encouraged him when no one else believed, who had given his work a home when he had nothing, was now in a legal battle, with his father. "Dad," his voice was low, almost shaking, "why is Mama Chica suing you?" Chief Bamadiel shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his son's gaze. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" Toby snapped. This is the woman who helped me survive when you kicked me out. What did you do to her? The older man sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. Years ago, she owned a small piece of land in Lekki. It wasn't worth much then. My client wanted it for a development project. I used my influence to push the deal through. She didn't have the money to fight it. It was legal, but it was wrong, Toby interrupted sharply. His voice was cold now. You stole from her. Chief Bamadiel's eyes hardened for a moment, as if the old pride was about to rear its head, but then they softened. I didn't think of it like that at the time. I thought I was just doing my job. Toby's hands curled into fists. She never told me. All those years she helped me, she stayed silent. She could have poisoned my heart against you, but she didn't. There was a long silence. The ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than before. Finally, Toby spoke again, his tone steady but firm. Here's the deal. I will save your law firm. I will pay every debt. But only if you return that land to Mama Chica and apologize publicly, not just to her, but to everyone who trusted you. Chief Bamadiel's face stiffened. You're asking me to humiliate myself. No, Toby said, his voice soft but cutting, I'm asking you to be a man. For a long time, his father didn't answer. He stared at the check on his desk, 350 million Nigerian nairas, enough to wipe away years of financial strain, and then at his son. Something in his expression shifted. The once proud man who had cast his son out now seemed smaller, not in stature, but in ego. The following week, the press gathered at a public event outside the law chambers. Cameras flashed as Chief Bamadiel stood before the crowd, Mama Chica by his side. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. Years ago, I wronged this woman. I used my position to take what was not mine. Today, I am returning it, and I am sorry. The crowd murmured in surprise. Some clapped. Mama Chica, wearing her usual brightly patterned headscarf, accepted the land documents without a word. She simply turned to Toby, her eyes glistening, and gave a small nod, the same kind of nod she had given years ago when she first displayed his work in her shop. In the days that followed, news outlets across Nigeria and beyond reported on the dramatic reconciliation. The headlines read, Disgraced lawyer redeems himself after son's ultimatum, and Artist forces father to right old wrongs. Weeks later, Toby unveiled a new painting at his Lagos exhibition. It depicted a father and son standing together under a single umbrella in the rain, the father's arm resting gently on the son's shoulder. The background was dark, but light spilled from above, illuminating their faces. He titled it, Forgiven, but Not Forgotten. The painting sold within hours, but more importantly, it became a symbol of redemption and accountability. This story teaches us to follow our passion, even when the world calls it foolish. Your gift can open doors you never imagined. If you liked the story, make sure to hit the subscribe button, like and comment your thoughts. Thanks for watching and catch you in the next video.